Here is the evolution of macOS in a nutshell. In 1984, Apple launched the original Macintosh, and along with it came System 1, the first operating system built around an intuitive graphical interface, at a time when most computers used only text commands.
Now I'd like to show you Macintosh in person. All of the images you are about to see on the large screen will be generated by what's in that bag.
This is where graphical windows, drop-down menus, full mouse support, icons, the drag-and-drop function, and the trash can were born, elements that would define the modern user experience. System 1 did not have real multitasking and did not support internal hard drives. Everything worked only with floppy disks. System 2, 3, and 4 followed, refining the experience. Faster startup, expanded memory, better disk handling, and applications running more reliably. Finder became more powerful, and the Mac began to be adopted in the creative field thanks to its superior graphics. With System 5, Apple introduced cooperative multitasking for the first time, allowing users to have multiple applications open simultaneously. It wasn't perfect, but it was a major leap compared to the early versions. System 6 is one of the most stable versions of the classic system. It introduced Macro Maker, which recorded mouse and keyboard input as macro commands, support for Apple Image Writer LQ and PostScript laser printers, and a smooth experience for the hardware of the time. It was widely adopted by creators, photographers, and video editors at the end of the 1980s. System 7 marks a defining moment in Apple's history. It introduces advanced multitasking, full-color support, QuickTime, the technology that would become the foundation of Apple's multimedia, shortcuts, and a modernized version of the Finder. At the same time, the industry was changing profoundly. Windows 95 had become a global phenomenon supported by aggressive marketing, and the name Windows was instantly recognizable. By comparison, the name System sounded generic, and Apple needed a much stronger brand for its own operating system. Thus, in 1996, with System 7.5.1, the name macOS appears for the first time, marking an important identity shift for the Macintosh platform. Released in 1997, shortly after Steve Jobs returned to the company, macOS 8 brought a major interface redesign with the new Platinum theme, offering faster windows, a modern look, and important optimizations for PowerPC processors. The system integrated internet features much better and introduced new technologies such as Sherlock and an improved Finder. It was a huge commercial success at a time when Apple desperately needed financial stability and a product capable of restoring user confidence. macOS 9 was the last version of the classic system and the bridge to macOS 10. It included Keychain, the password manager still used today, iTools, Apple's first online service, and a much faster Finder. After macOS 9, Apple not only changed the technology but also the name. The new system would be called macOS 10, plus a distinct codename. The letter X represents both the Roman numeral 10 and a tribute to Next technology, the platform created by Steve Jobs and used as the foundation for Apple's future operating system. Thus, macOS 10.0 was released in 2001, combining the robust and modern Unix foundation with the intuitive and elegant user experience Apple was known for. Cheetah introduced the Aqua interface with glossy, translucent buttons and an aesthetic never seen before. Steve Jobs said it was so attractive that you'd want to lick it. However, all these visual effects required enormous resources, and the system ran slowly on the hardware of the time. Apple responds quickly, and in September 2001, it releases Puma. The Aqua interface remains, but everything becomes much more fluid, from opening applications to navigating in Finder. It also brings practical features such as CD and DVD burning, printer compatibility, and a generally better system performance. Jaguar was the version that transformed OS X into a mature and complete system. It brought more than 150 improvements and features that did not exist before. Finder gains a search function, QuickTime receives MPEG-4 support, and Apple introduces its first serious accessibility tools under the name Universal Access. It is also the version from which applications still used today were born, such as Address Book, which later became Contacts. The Panther version brought Safari as the Mac's default browser, replacing Internet Explorer. Panther also brings over 150 improvements, from the new font book to a reorganized Finder and updated developer tools. Tiger is considered one of the biggest updates in the entire history of macOS. In addition to more than 200 new features, Tiger introduces Spotlight, the instant search engine that changes the way you find files and applications. It brings Automator, an automation tool for every user, and offers VoiceOver, advanced accessibility for people with disabilities. In addition, Tiger becomes the first Apple operating system to run on Intel processors, moving away from the PowerPC architecture. The Leopard version marks one of the biggest visual changes for the Mac. The dock was redesigned, stacks appeared, and the desktop looked more modern. Leopard also introduced Time Machine and major improvements to Spotlight, along with expanded support for 64-bit applications. Snow Leopard continued in the same direction, but focused almost entirely on performance. Apple rewrote most applications in 64 bits, preparing the full transition to this architecture. The interface remained familiar, but the system became more stable, and this period also marks the beginning of the idea of the Mac App Store. Lion was the first version of macOS that was no longer available on CDs or DVDs. The operating system was download-only and brought to the Mac many elements from iOS, Launchpad, multi-touch gestures, and an interface more similar to that of the iPhone and iPad. Lion also introduced natural scrolling, an initially controversial change in which content moves in the direction of the gesture, not the opposite as on Windows. In 2012, Apple dropped the name macOS X and named the system simply OS X to align it with iOS and the other platforms. Thus, OS 10.8 Mountain Lion continued the integration with iOS through the introduction of the Notes, Reminders, and Messages applications. The most important new feature was Notification Center, which brought to the Mac a modern notification system with on-screen banners and centralized alerts. Mavericks marked the transition from feline names to names inspired by California locations. In this new version, privacy became a priority, and iCloud Keychain was introduced to manage passwords securely. This is also when the Maps and iBooks applications appeared on the Mac, Finder received tags, and notifications became interactive. With Yosemite, Apple delivered the biggest Mac redesign in recent years. The interface shifted to a flat style directly inspired by iOS, with thinner fonts, modern iconography, and a much brighter color palette. Yosemite also introduced handoff and continuity. The Mac and the iPhone were meant to work as a single device, with transitions between them being as seamless as possible. In 2015, El Capitan was released as a version focused on performance and refinement. The system became noticeably faster, applications opened up to 40% quicker. This is also when Split View appeared, the feature that allowed two applications to be displayed side by side. Sierra marked an important change. Apple abandoned the name OS X and officially switched to macOS, finally aligning all of the company's platforms. This version also brought additional features inspired by iOS, such as the ability to automatically unlock the Mac using Apple Watch. This was also when storage optimization was introduced and Siri arrived on the Mac, expanding the Apple ecosystem in a predictable but significant way. High Sierra was a technical update, not a visual one. It introduced the new APFS file system, faster and much more secure than the old HFS Plus. It also added support for the new HEVC video format and the HEIC image format. Safari Mail and Photos received several improvements, but overall it was a transitional release necessary to prepare the Mac for the future. Mojave was released in 2018 and brought one of the most popular modern features, Dark Mode, and Dynamic Desktop made the wallpaper gradually change from sunrise to sunset. Integration with iOS continued with the arrival of the Stocks, News, and Home apps on the Mac. macOS Catalina marked the end of the iTunes era. The gigantic application that handled music, movies, and podcasts was split into 3 separate apps: music, podcasts, and TV, each much simpler and faster. Catalina also strengthened the connection between the Mac and the iPad through Sidecar, the feature that allowed the iPad to be used as a secondary display. In 2020, Apple released Big Sur, becoming version 11. Big Sur introduced the biggest visual redesign since the arrival of macOS X, with a much more spacious and rounded interface inspired by iOS. It was also the historic moment when Apple transitioned to Macs with M1 processors, and Big Sur became the first system capable of running iOS apps natively on the Mac thanks to the ARM architecture. Monterey brought a wave of features focused on productivity and collaboration. Shortcuts debuted on the Mac, enabling quick automation of workflows. Universal Control introduced a spectacular experience in which users could move their cursor and files seamlessly between Mac and iPad. Safari received a redesign with tab groups, and FaceTime was updated with improved audio and visual modes tailored to new remote working styles. Ventura introduced Stage Manager, an important interface change that automatically organized windows into side groups, making task switching easier. Ventura also expanded device integration through Continuity Camera, which allowed the iPhone to be used as a webcam, and the Mail app gained modern options like Undo Send. In 2023, Sonoma brought a series of improvements that made the system more interactive and flexible. Users could place widgets directly on the desktop and interact with them without opening the corresponding apps. Safari gained support for multiple profiles and sites treated as standalone applications. In the video area, macOS Sonoma introduced a completely new presenter view and visual reactions during calls, while gaming received attention through optimizations and new titles. Sequoia introduced Apple Intelligence for the first time. Users received writing tools for drafting and editing, Image Playground for image generation, and Genmoji for personalized emoji. Siri became smarter, understanding natural speech and conversational context much better. Sequoia also introduced iPhone mirroring, a feature that allowed full control of the iPhone from the Mac, even when the phone was locked. In addition, the Passwords app became a cross-platform solution for managing authentication data. In 2025, Apple released macOS Tahoe version 26, and also the last one to offer support for Macs with Intel processors. Tahoe introduced for the first time a version number based on the year and presented the new Liquid class design, with translucent elements and tint customizable icons. Spotlight received the largest update in its history, allowing actions to be executed directly from the search bar and using Apple Intelligence to suggest commands. In addition, it brought new applications such as Phone app, Games, and Journal, which clearly expanded the functionality of the system in the direction of entertainment and digital health. macOS didn't change overnight. It evolved version by version, decade by decade. Which macOS update felt like the biggest leap to you? If you enjoyed this kind of video, make sure to subscribe to our channel, and if you give us a like and leave a comment, it really helps us out. Thank you.